On our third wedding anniversary, when I was 5 months pregnant, I walked into my own home and saw Hunter Reed with a young, beautiful woman, their bodies tangled in a scene that shattered every illusion I had left. He didn't even look startled. He calmly stood, buttoned his shirt, and escorted her to the door like it was nothing. His eyes swept over my pregnant belly with a cold, smug glint before he said, "This won't happen again, Madeline Carter." "Don't dwell on things like this," he added almost casually. "Focus on having the baby." I stood frozen, staring at the man I had shared a bed with for 3 years, suddenly feeling as if he were a complete stranger. Everything that had once belonged to this home seemed to slip away without hesitation, just like him. Later I learned he had laughed with his friends, saying he wanted to see if I could really stay strong until the baby was born. He said I was 30 already, 5 months along, and wouldn't dare terminate the pregnancy. As if to grant his wish, I called him myself. Soon after I had the injection to end the pregnancy, I made sure he was there to watch our child slip away from us. 10 years of knowing each other, 3 years of marriage, and we couldn't even part quietly, each finding our own way to heal. So let it all turn to dust, I thought. Let us collapse together. I remember standing there that day, my belly clearly rounded beneath my dress, frozen in place at the bedroom door. The cake I had waited in line for over an hour to buy slipped from my hands and smashed to the floor, crumbling like our marriage. From inside the room came the sound of heavy, breathless moans, that deep, familiar male voice I knew so well. I didn't need to look to know it was him. Still, I couldn't stop myself. I pushed the door open. They both startled at the noise and pulled apart. The young woman, her smooth skin glowing, scrambled to pull the blanket over her body, trying to hide the marks of passion scattered across her. The air was thick with heat, and the scent of sex a suffocating mix that clung to me. Summer was already sweltering, and the sweat had soaked my clothes when I was waiting in line for that cake. Yet now my whole body went cold, a chill rising from deep in my chest. My mind stalled, my body moved on autopilot as I reached for the light switch. The warm golden light revealed Hunter's face, so familiar yet unbearably foreign. He didn't flinch, didn't apologize. He simply reached for the crisp white shirt on the edge of the bed and slipped it on. The nausea rose fast and violent, making me sway my knees weak. I took out my phone, snapped a few photos, then sat down on the sofa in the living room, my body stiff as stone. When he finished seeing her out, Hunter walked toward me, his steps unhurried. My thoughts were in chaos, my chest tight, as if I couldn't breathe. I looked down at my belly, where our child was growing. Maybe the baby sensed my turmoil, because I felt a few gentle kicks like a silent attempt to comfort me. My fingers clenched the phone, my mouth silent. That silence apparently enraged him. Wearing slippers, he kicked over the trash can in the living room, glaring at me. "Not enough pictures yet," he sneered. "Want me to call a few more women over so you can get your fill?" I looked up at him. My face twisted from anger and the bitter taste of humiliation. "Is this really what you want to say to me, Hunter Reed?" I asked, each word slow and heavy. He just stood there silent for a long moment. I didn't know what I should do, but I knew I couldn't breathe in that house another second without it hurting. By instinct, I headed for the door, but he grabbed me from behind and shoved me hard onto the sofa. Without it to break my fall, I would have hit the floor. Pain bloomed in my abdomen and my face went pale. I clutched my belly, the ache sharp and frightening. For a moment, fear flickered in his eyes. "I didn't mean to," he stammered, "but you're my wife, and your first reaction was to take pictures as evidence. You don't feel any pain for us at all, do you? Or maybe you just don't care about me." What did pain look like to him, I wondered. Did he expect me to sob hysterically, to fight with the woman in his bed, to scream and beg him to come back? He had cheated in the home I had built with care on the bed, where we had once held each other every night. And yet in his eyes, my taking photos was the unforgivable act, the proof that I didn't love him enough. In that moment, I realized he wanted me to feel guilty for not performing heartbreak in a way that suited him. He wanted to believe that my restraint meant I didn't care, so he could wear the mask of the wounded party. I almost laughed, but the sound stuck in my throat, my chest aching from the weight of it. He used that as his proof that I didn't love him, that I didn't value him, as if my refusal to put on a show of heartbreak was the ultimate betrayal. A bitter, humorless laugh slipped from my lips, the kind that tastes like iron and shame. He carried himself as if he were the one wounded, his dark eyes suddenly softening, as if he were the victim in all of this. Lowering himself halfway, his voice gentled, laced with false remorse. Madeline Carter. I only had a few drinks today. I'm sorry I was careless. Don't be angry, it's not good for the baby. The absurdity of it all nearly made me choke. The man I had shared a bed with for years was, it turned out, an accomplished actor, so convincing that for a split second, he almost made me believe the cruel cold stranger I had faced moments earlier wasn't him at all. After a decade of knowing each other and 3 years of marriage, my first instinct now wasn't to fight back. It was to avoid provoking him. I was pregnant, unemployed, and in no position to face the consequences of his temper. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails cut into my palms, pain sparking up my arms, holding back the storm of fury boiling in my chest. I leaned back into the sofa, closed my eyes, and let the tears slide down silently. My submission seemed to please him. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. He didn't mind. If anything, he seemed even more certain that the child inside me would keep me from doing anything bold. It wasn't long before his phone rang. He hesitated, trying to negotiate with whoever was on the other end, asking if they could reschedule. From where I sat, I watched him standing out on the balcony, the sight of him moving in the same air I was breathing, making me feel nauseous. The more I felt it, the more I knew I couldn't escape without a plan. Hunter Reed was a suspicious man. I had to perform for him, make him think I was too fragile to act. With my belly this big, one wrong step could put my safety, my life in jeopardy. When he turned to glance back inside, I buried my face in my hands and let out heavy, ragged sobs. He froze, clearly not expecting to see me so undone. My body slumped halfway off the sofa, trembling, the tears unstoppable. Perhaps because he had never seen me lose control in front of him, he looked uneasy, walking toward me and placing a tentative hand on my back. "Madeline, you're pregnant," he murmured. "I'm sorry, it's all my fault. Please don't cry. Not for the baby's sake." The way he said it, anyone might have thought he cherished this child more than anything. Cherished it so much that he could let its mother walk in on such a vile scene. My wet eyes lifted to meet his. "Why? What did I do to deserve this? Why would you treat me this way?" He pulled me into his arms, and I fought the nausea, my body stiff in his embrace like a wooden doll. "You've done nothing wrong, it's all my fault. There will never be a next time, Madeline." Then, to my disgust, his eyes filled with tears. Those tears made my skin crawl, as revolting as the man himself. I slipped from his hold, letting my gaze drop to my belly, feigning resignation. "Just don't let it happen again, Hunter." He reached to wipe my tears, but I turned away. Inside, my hatred had already climbed to its peak. The phone rang again. This time he was sure I would let him go for the baby's sake, and for the weight of our shared years. He gave me a look full of mock remorse before transferring money to my account. "Buy yourself something you like, I'll be back soon." I sat motionless on the sofa, my face empty as though the pain had gone beyond anything tears could reach. He glanced at me once more, his eyes flickering with something unreadable before the persistent ringing pulled him away. As the door clicked shut, I wiped my face dry and walked to the window, waiting until his car had pulled out of the garage. Then I returned to the bedroom, gathered the important documents, and packed a small suitcase with only what I needed most. My eyes caught on the large wedding portrait hanging on the wall. The woman in that frame, beaming with joy, had no idea she would end up here. That smile cut into me like a blade. I reached out and tipped the frame forward, letting it crash to the floor and shatter into jagged pieces like the marriage it had once celebrated. I wandered slowly through the apartment, from bedroom to living room to balcony. Each space crowded with pieces of me I had poured into it. The potted plants I had cared for, the furniture I had chosen with care. Every tile, every curtain, even the dining table where we had shared so many meals. Before everything fell apart, I had been planning to replace the old hairdryer in the bathroom. I had ordered a small chair for the balcony, along with a round wooden table and a set of floral tablecloths I had chosen myself. Hunter had liked them too. I used to think that when the weather turned pleasant, we would sit out there together, sipping tea, reading, basking in the sun. I had truly believed that scene would be part of our life, but now I knew that day would never come. Hunter had loved those little touches. I used to picture us there when the air was cool, sipping tea, reading, basking in the afternoon sun. I believed that scene would be our happiness, a small, perfect corner of the life we were building. But that day will never come now. All it took was a slight change of plans. Me coming home earlier than usual, to discover that the life I thought was perfect had been nothing but a fragile bubble. The moment his hand reached for it, it burst, leaving nothing but emptiness. Hunter had held me so many times, telling me that because of me, this house was truly a home, that I had given him the family he had always longed for. And yet he was the one who destroyed it all with his own hands. I went online and hired 2 repairmen, telling them to tear the place apart, smash it all the way. I was smashing the past between us. I pulled my suitcase behind me and called a cab. When the driver asked where to, I froze. I didn't have an answer. Where was I supposed to go? My closest friend was out of town, and everyone else was either part of our shared circle or just acquaintances. But even with nowhere to go, I knew I had to move forward. The image of Hunter's smug, cold expression burned in my mind. If I turned back, it would be no different from killing myself. I picked a hotel in the opposite direction from our home and booked a room. After checking in, I neatly arranged my belongings. Lying on the unfamiliar bed, my mind went blank, yet emotions swelled and crashed inside me like relentless waves. I don't know how much time passed before the baby's gentle kicks pulled me back to myself. At that point, I had no more tears to shed. Whatever had happened there was still a child growing inside me. I had barely eaten all day. When I finally picked up my phone, I saw a friend request on WeChat from an account with a Hello Kitty profile picture. I didn't need to guess who it was. Thinking ahead to what I would need to handle next, I accepted. Aside from catching them today, I knew nothing else about the details. Her first message read, "I'm sorry. Hunter and I never meant to hurt you." I didn't respond. I wanted to see how far she would go with her act. Her next messages were a flood of empty words. She claimed she loved Hunter too much, told me how kind he had been to her, how he'd signed a contract with her when she was being scolded at work and couldn't keep her old job, even introducing her to valuable clients. She said she never meant to destroy anyone's relationship, but love was something no one could control. She told me Hunter was suffering too, living in torment every day. Suffering because he couldn't openly cheat and had to face his pregnant wife. Torment. The kind of torment that comes from having to hide an affair. If his heart had changed, why not be honest sooner? Why drag me here 30 years old? Heavy with child, cornered on every side, reading her messages made me physically sick. Pregnancy had already brought constant nausea, but her words made me want to retch more than anything else. I muted the conversation, went to the bathroom, and dry heaved until there was nothing left but bitter water. My stomach cramped so hard I could barely stand it, and I ordered a plain, tasteless meal just to have something in me. Even eating, I couldn't taste a thing. The baby was restless that day, kicking me over and over. Out of nowhere, a strange sadness washed over me. Maybe it was trying to tell me it wanted to live. This was the child I had waited for, hoped for. I forced myself to swallow every bite despite the discomfort, and eventually the baby calmed. It had always been this well-behaved ever since those first fluttering movements. I used to lay my hand on my belly and tease softly. "Sweetheart, you're hurting Mommy." And just like that, it would still as if it understood. Just like today when I finally ate a little and gently stroked my belly, the baby settled into calm again. But it didn't know that while I was forcing down those bites, I was weighing the moment when I might end its life. I sat in that hotel room from nightfall until the first light of dawn. During those hours, she kept sending me photos and screenshots of their conversations. The timestamps were clear, and each image was like a blade to my chest. Since the beginning of my pregnancy, Hunter had only taken me to one prenatal checkup. I had always tried to be understanding of his work, never wanting to seem needy or become a burden. I truly had wanted to build a good life with him. But all of that I see now was only my own delusion. March 15th was the first time I went for a prenatal appointment. After we left the hospital, he hurried off saying a client needed to see him urgently. I didn't doubt him for a second. The early spring air was cold and damp, a light drizzle seeping down the collar of his shirt. Without thinking, I unwrapped my scarf and looped it around his neck. "Hunter, you're always thinking about style instead of staying warm," I teased. But he didn't seem to hear me, just ushered me into the car before waving down a taxi and disappearing. Sitting in the back seat, I watched him vanish from view. Hunter had always been steady, composed. He worked hard for our family, for me, for the child we were expecting. My heart at the time was caught between a bittersweet ache and a warm glow of gratitude. I glanced down at my stomach, still flat then, and imagined the day our baby would be born. I pictured what kind of father he might become. I believed our little family of 3 would be warm and happy. I had no idea that instead of meeting a client, he was going to see another woman. After I became pregnant, I was sensitive to smells. Still knowing how much he loved seafood congee, I fought through the nausea and spent the evening making his favorite dish. I kept reheating it as it cooled, waiting for him over and over again. In the end, all I got was a curt text. "Babe, go ahead and sleep. There's a bit of a mess here. I'll be late, maybe even until morning." Now, thanks to her messages and pictures, I know that night he had rushed off to celebrate her birthday. In one of the photos, the man who couldn't handle spicy food was grinning across the table at her, surrounded by Sichuan dishes so fiery they could strip the tongue. The next day, he came home holding his stomach, complaining that dinner with a client had upset him. He told me work had pushed him too far, eating things he shouldn't until he was in pain. I remember finding medicine for him and even scolding that so-called client for being inconsiderate. Looking back, it's laughable. I was nothing more than a fool dancing in the palm of his hand. She even sent me a video from that night. In it, he held a massive bouquet of flowers, the table piled high with gifts. His eyes lit up as he wished her a happy birthday. At the end of the clip, I spotted in the trash bin under the table the khaki scarf with the kazoo pattern that I had wrapped around his neck just that morning. Both the scarf and my heart had been tossed away like garbage. Tears fell onto my phone screen, faster than I could wipe them away. Forcing myself to breathe evenly, I washed my face, but her messages kept coming. I read them with a blank expression, my heart a cold stone in my chest. April 3rd was my second prenatal appointment. I went alone, not wanting to disrupt his work. The waiting room was filled with couples. I was one of the few women sitting there by myself. I was anxious, afraid I might hear bad news. No woman wants to face moments like that alone, but I told myself that his absence meant he was working hard for our family, for me, for the baby. I told myself I should understand, but reality had slapped me hard across the face, snapping me out of my foolish dreams. I finally saw what I truly was, a pitiful blind woman who had loved one-sidedly for far too long. While I was sitting alone in the clinic waiting room, he was in the apartment that woman rented, wrapped around her cooking meals, together helping her rehearse presentations. That young woman even had the audacity to post about it on social media, teasing him with captions like, "I'm always bothering him, what should I do? And it's my fault I've been spoiled by him." He commented under her post, "Silly girl, how could I ever feel at ease when you're like this?" To which she replied, "Then I'll stay this way forever so you'll always feel at ease. What else can I do?" I scrolled through their exchanges, feeling my heart bleed with every word. The cruelest part was that during that exact time, I had been blaming myself, wondering if the stress of his work was why he was rarely home. I used to worry about him overworking himself. On those rare nights he stayed home, I noticed the dark circles under his eyes and would gently press my fingers against his temples, massaging softly as I teased Mr. Reed. "Are you having pre-fatherhood anxiety? Our life isn't that hard, you know." He would lift his head and look at me, his eyes briefly flickering with something I couldn't name. I remember leaning in to kiss his cheek, then sitting beside him, lacing my fingers through his. "Hunter, we're husband and wife. I'm not going to let you carry everything on your shoulders alone. Once the baby's a little older, I'll go back to work. Don't push yourself too hard." He stayed quiet, his gaze distant, and I couldn't help but cradle his face, smiling as I said, "You don't believe me. I even have a little savings account of my own." His eyes softened, at least I thought they did, before he pulled me into his arms and rested his head on my shoulder. I ran my fingers through his coarse hair and mock pouted. "What's wrong?" surprised. "Just remember, you're not allowed to touch that money unless it's absolutely necessary." He looked up at me with such tenderness it caught me off guard. I lowered my voice. "But if things really get bad, you can use it." Now I wonder, what was he thinking as I said that? Did he feel even a shred of guilt for his pregnant wife? Or was he quietly congratulating himself for being so skillful at deceiving me, thinking how naive and pathetic I was? Was he already deciding on the words he'd use to get me out of the way so he could take her out for dinner and fun? Or was he busy planning how to introduce her to more clients? Maybe even pull strings to get her a better job? Or maybe the only thing on his mind was her youthful, alluring body? Whatever it was, the care he lavished on her was no different from what he had once done for me over a decade ago. The disgust that rose in me wasn't just for him, it was for myself. Why had I wasted my best years on someone like him? Why did I have to wait until everything fell apart to see the truth? Why had I been so stupid as to hand over my entire heart, my soul to a man like this? My disgust curdled into hatred. Hatred for his lies, his betrayal, his contempt for me. Hatred for how he had turned my love and my pride into a cruel joke. He made me feel like a fool, a worthless woman who had given everything and been repaid with cold cruelty. I stayed in that hotel room for 3 whole days, sleeping in a haze, barely aware of the world outside. Even when the baby kicked hard, I almost didn't feel it. I was simply exhausted. I forced myself to get up, but even the thought of stepping out of that room drained me completely. Then one morning, sunlight broke through the gap in the curtains, striking my face. I stood up and pulled the curtains wide open. Outside, it was a beautiful day. It had rained heavily the night before, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fresh rain. The streets below were alive with people and traffic. Life was moving on as it always did. In life, there are some things you can avoid, but there are also things you can't run from. I took a deep breath and decided to leave the room. Just as I was about to go, my phone lit up with a video call from my best friend, Natalie Brooks. Instinctively, I didn't want her to see me looking so worn down, so I quickly switched off the camera. Moments later, her worried voice came through in a voice message. "What's going on with you? Last night I dreamed you were crying. Are you okay? Why won't you answer my calls?" I couldn't hold back anymore. I had been trying so hard to be strong these past few days, but now the tears came all at once, falling like a sudden storm. Natalie Brooks booked the earliest flight she could find and was by my side that same afternoon. She said something I will never forget. This was too big for me to face alone, and she wasn't about to let me do it. For the first time in days, I felt that maybe life wasn't entirely made of pain. She took my phone from me and refused to give it back, worried that in my fragile state, I might do something reckless. With her medical background, she reached out to colleagues and found a trustworthy doctor for me. We went straight to the hospital for a full checkup. Sitting there waiting for results, guilt began to seep in. How had I let my emotions consume me so much that I had neglected my own health? Thankfully, the results showed no serious problems. Then the story shifts to Hunter Reed's point of view. That day, after finishing work, he rushed home. He didn't know why, but an uneasy feeling gnawed at him, even though logic told him that with my advanced pregnancy, I couldn't possibly do anything extreme. Still, images of me crying silently, maybe losing control and breaking down, kept flashing in his mind. In his eyes, I had always been strong and unyielding, like the first time he met me, a high school girl brave enough to confront her cheating father with a knife, forcing him to divorce. He used to believe I was someone who could thrive without depending on anyone. But seeing me broken and exhausted that day had made him realize I could be hurt too. A flicker of regret passed through him, but it was quickly smothered by his own self-justifications. He told himself that if I had been softer, more dependent on him, he wouldn't have sought tenderness elsewhere. Meanwhile, at his office, Sierra Blake showed up in tears, as she always did. She asked him what to do about the photos I had taken, sobbing that her life was ruined, and he needed to take responsibility. His temper flared. "Take responsibility for you." "Who takes responsibility for me?" he snapped. "If you hadn't insisted on coming to my place, none of this would have happened." Sierra shot back angrily. "What's that supposed to mean? Do you think I forced you? Do you think I magically had your house key? You let me in and now you're blaming me." In that moment, the image of me came unbidden into his mind, strong, proud, unwilling to demean herself. No matter how much it hurt, if it were me, I would have walked away cleanly, rather than let things devolve into such chaos. The thought brought a wave of unease he couldn't shake. Without bothering to argue further, he drove home quickly. At first, he planned to stop and buy me flowers, the soft blush pink roses I loved most. He remembered how I used to arrange them in a vase, play soft music, and curl up in the corner of the sofa with a book. But the anxiety pressing down on him made him skip it, telling himself he would make it up to me next time. It had been a long time since he'd bought me flowers anyway, always sidetracked by Sierra's constant demands. He reassured himself that after so many years of marriage, romance wasn't necessary anymore. Still, since I had caught him that day, even though he believed I wouldn't do anything drastic while pregnant, he didn't want too much distance to grow between us. After all these years, he had grown used to having me there. He thought that maybe a little coaxing would be enough to smooth things over. What he didn't realize was that there would be no more chances. Any flowers he might buy from now on would never be accepted by me again. When he finally reached our apartment complex, it was late. The place felt unnervingly still. For the first time, he saw that the light that always waited for him was off. A sudden surge of guilt and fear rose in his chest. He unlocked the door and flicked on the light, but the living room was empty. No woman curled up with a book, quiet warmth. Instead, he was met with chaos. The home that had always been tidy, bright and warm, was now in shambles, things broken, overturned, destroyed. He stood frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. For the first time in his life, Hunter Reed felt truly lost. He frantically dialed my number, but there was no answer. He even looked up online, what happens when someone blocks your number. Seeing that I hadn't blocked him eased him slightly. He told himself I was just angry. At first, he kept sending messages hopeful that I would eventually reply. No matter what Hunter Reed sent, it was like throwing messages into a bottomless ocean. His irritation grew with each unanswered call, each ignored text. Let's see how long she can keep this up, he thought bitterly. When the baby comes, will she really dare not tell me? He headed into the bedroom to change but stopped cold at the doorway. There in the corner lay a ruined cake, crushed misshapen, the frosting smeared into unrecognizable streaks. Only the familiar packaging told him it was his favorite kind, the one he rarely bought because it meant standing in line for ages. Today had been sweltering 88 degrees, and the thought of Madeline Carter heavily pregnant waiting in that heat, carrying it home with such effort, made something twist sharply in his chest. On impulse, he sat down, scooped up a bit of the smashed cake with his finger, and tasted it. But all he could register was bitterness coating his mouth. Could cake really taste this bitter? No. The bitterness didn't come from sugar gone wrong. It came from a woman's heart, crushed, trampled, shattered beyond recognition. For days he kept trying to reach her, but nothing came back. Friends told him to go find her before it was too late, but his pride refused. Let her play tough, he said. She's 30 years old, not some naive 20-year-old. She's been at home for 3 years. She has no idea how the world has changed. Once she's suffered enough, she'll come back. One friend sat silently for a long time, then sighed. Buddy, your wife is heavily pregnant. If something happens to her, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. That remark made Hunter's temper explode. He slammed his glass of whiskey at the man's head. Thankfully, the friend ducked in time, or he'd have been bloodied by glass and liquor. After that, no one dared mention my name in front of him again. Then, just as he had predicted, his phone lit up with my caller ID. A flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. See? She couldn't hold out. But when he answered, the voice wasn't mine. It was Natalie Brooks, cold and flat. OB/GYN Clinic, St. Mary's Hospital. That was all she said before hanging up. Hunter stared at the screen, stunned. Then the realization crashed over him like a tidal wave, violent and suffocating. Madeline Carter, she wouldn't. She couldn't. But I could, and I did. It wasn't that I hadn't hesitated. I'd been carrying this child for over 5 months. How could I easily sever the bond between us? But it was precisely because of my child that I had to be ruthless. I didn't want my baby's life to mirror mine. Years ago, when my father cheated, my mother forgave him again and again, telling herself she had to for me because she was pregnant. And what was the result? Once a line is crossed, there's no end to the crossing. Each betrayal bled into the next. Until forgiveness became a habit she could no longer break. In the years that followed, her compromises multiplied, and somewhere along the way she began to resent me. She decided that my very existence had ruined her life. But what child gets to choose whether they're born? If I'd had the choice, I would never have appeared in this world just to be the reason for her suffering. Eventually, my parents divorced when I was in high school, not because my father had a change of heart, but because I forced the ending. That day he came home drunk after losing at cards and blamed everything on my mother. When I walked in from school, she was barely breathing, her body limp and fading. Something inside me snapped. I went straight to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and lunged at him. I wasn't afraid to die. I thought whether I killed him or he killed me, my mother would be freed. If I died, he'd go to prison. If he died, I'd go to prison. Either way, she would finally be free. But strength between a man and a teenage girl is no contest. My first swing caught him off guard, slicing his arm and making him reel in shock. But then rage took over. He kicked me hard in the stomach, sending me crashing to the floor, my head slamming against the edge of the counter. Blood trickled from my forehead, blurring my vision, but there was no fear in me, only a fire that burned hotter with every second. This day had to end, and someone had to end it. Anger surged through me, swallowing the pain. I hated him. I hated the reckless cruelty of a man who could raise his hand against his wife and child, the selfishness that poisoned every corner of our lives. I thought even if I died here, I would make him pay, make him understand that even a dull blade would eventually fall on men like him. But fate in its twisted way handed me a third option. Maybe it was my mother's frantic screaming, or maybe the chaos in our apartment, but it was enough to wake Hunter Reed, the neighbor in the unit next door. I'd known him at school since the start of the new year. He'd transferred in and ended up in the desk behind mine. Honestly, I hadn't liked him at first. I didn't like loud, trouble-prone boys, and in just 1 month he'd been called to the principal's office 2 or 3 times for fighting. He didn't like me either, a quiet, book-absorbed girl who barely spoke. So despite sitting close, we hardly exchanged a word. It wasn't until that night that I realized he was my neighbor. He climbed through my window and planted himself between me and my father. He was just 18, but tall, broad-shouldered, solid from years of sports. In a few swift moves, he overpowered my father with ease. And as I stood there staring up at him, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wished I were a man. Wished I had the same strength so my resistance wouldn't have to be so desperate, so exhausting. After that night, my parents divorced. I should have been relieved, but the days that followed were filled with my mother's accusations. No matter what he did, he's still your father. How could you do something like that? Life is nothing if not cruelly ironic. I had loved her so much. I had wanted nothing more than to save her from her misery, to throw myself in front of her again and again, so that if I couldn't protect her, at least the blows would land on me instead. I loved her to the point of feeling guilty simply for existing. But in the end, she turned her blame on me. He's your father. How could you be so heartless? You have no conscience. Wasn't she the same woman who once told me that if it weren't for me, she would have left him long ago? People change so easily. She used to say she loved me, but my memories are filled only with her tears, her helpless eyes, and the cutting words. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be suffering like this. And Hunter Reed, he once told me he loved me too. Yet he was the one who betrayed me, who tore me apart until I could barely recognize myself. I won't pretend I didn't love the child I carried, but I refuse to let that love be warped into a lifetime of regret. I didn't want my baby to grow up sensing even the smallest hint of resentment from me, didn't want them to live with the gnawing weight of guilt, the endless questioning of their own worth. Lying in that hospital bed after they injected the drug, I could still feel the faint fluttering movements inside me. It was a pain so sharp and bitter it defied words, the kind that left you gasping but voiceless. I stared at the ceiling, fully awake, as the fragile life inside me faded away. Fury roared through me, hatred for myself, for becoming the kind of mother I despised, one who could do something so cruel. But I hated even more the person who had driven me to this edge. Why did I have to carry every ounce of the pain? If there was to be suffering, then let us all suffer. No one gets to walk away unscathed. When Hunter finally burst into the hospital room, his face was ashen, his eyes wild. I lay silent, staring into the emptiness above me. His voice trembled. "Madeline, you're joking, right? This is all my fault, I know, but please don't use something like this to scare me." His gaze dropped to my stomach, and I saw the fear in his eyes. With Natalie Brooks's steady hands helping me, I pushed myself up, reached for him and said, "Come here, Hunter. Feel it, it's still moving." Maybe the medicine had just begun to work, but the baby kicked harder as if fighting to hold on. He placed his palm against my belly, and I saw his eyes instantly redden, tears pooling at the edges. His voice broke. "Madeline, it's my fault. All of it is my fault. Please don't ever scare me like this again." He thought I was joking. I wished more than anything that this was just a nightmare or some cruel joke. But reality had already shoved me into this place of no return. I looked at Hunter Reed with eyes stripped of warmth, my voice colder than ice as I told him there would be no later. His lips trembled as he said my name, but I only gave a faint, bitter smile. "I'm still better than you," I said. "After all, you're his father. You should see him one last time, shouldn't you?" I held his hand firmly against my stomach, and right at that moment the baby kicked hard against his palm. I fought through the tightening pain, tilted my head to meet his gaze, and whispered, "Do you feel that he's saying goodbye to you?" His hand jerked away as if burned disbelief clouding his eyes, pain flooding every line of his face. "Madeline, you—" His cheeks flushed, eyes bloodshot, and then he lost control. Like a wounded animal, he shouted, "What kind of woman are you? What are you made of?" How can you be this heartless? He's your child, too." His voice cracked as he cried, but before he could get closer, Natalie Brooks and the nurse pulled him back. I looked at him, this man unraveling before me, and I almost laughed. And I did laugh for a moment until the laughter dissolved into tears. My hands went to my belly as I asked, my tone sharp with mockery, "Hunter, you ask me why?" "That's exactly what I want to ask you. Why? What did I do wrong? What did I do to deserve this from you? When you were sneaking off lying beside another woman, crushing my feelings beneath your feet? Did you remember he was your child too? Did you spare even a shred of conscience for me and this baby?" His bloodshot eyes stayed fixed on me, tears streaming down his face. The irony stung. He cared now. But where had that care been when it mattered? Why was it so easy for him to be cruel to me? His shoulders slumped, his arms hung useless at his sides, and finally he collapsed to the floor. Natalie kept herself between us, as if ready to stop him from losing control again, but I touched her hand, signaling she didn't need to worry anymore. At this point, what did I have left to fear? When the doctor came in to check on me, Hunter's head snapped up like a drowning man spotting a lifeline. He clutched the doctor's arm, his voice shaking so badly the words nearly broke apart. "Doctor, please, please save him. He's my son too. Please, he's still alive. He's still moving. I'll do anything, pay anything. Just save him." The doctor gently pried his hand away, her eyes cold. "If you wanted to be a good father, you should have thought about that sooner. What did you do when there was still time?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. Only silence as he sat back down like a man who'd had everything ripped from him. The cramps came harder now, sharper than the pain of an ordinary abortion. This procedure meant I would have to give birth, but to a body without life. Natalie held me as I stood, guiding me step by step down the hall, her hand warm on my back whenever the pain doubled me over. Hunter just stood there useless until he reached out to steady me. I grabbed his hand and without thinking sank my teeth into it with all the strength I had left. Why should I be the only one to endure this? Why should he stand there untouched while my body was being torn apart? I bit until my mouth was full of the taste of blood, until my jaw ached and my strength gave out. Sweat soaked through my clothes, my hair clinging to my face and neck. The pain was relentless, stabbing through me like hundreds of needles, slicing through my insides with every contraction. Time lost meaning. I don't know how long I fought against it, until my body finally began to yield. The doctor gave me a painkiller, and for a fleeting moment, the agony dulled. When I felt the baby was about to come, I called Hunter to my side on purpose. Blood was pooling beneath me, running in warm streams, as the life inside me slipped further and further away. His face drained of color. He tried to turn away, but I held his hand tightly, refusing to let go. I wanted him to see. I wanted him to witness every second, to understand that in this moment, we were both murderers. And then it happened. The baby, a fully formed little boy, slid into the world, silent and still. Hunter's eyes went wide as they locked onto the tiny body resting in the metal tray. Without warning, he stumbled toward the bathroom, dropped to his knees in front of the toilet, and vomited violently. I stood there frozen, my mind barely able to process the scene around me. The air was thick with the metallic stench of blood, suffocating and unyielding. At my feet lay the child I had just brought into the world, but who would never take a single breath. My tears fell again, hot and relentless, blurring my vision. I forced myself to stand, every muscle trembling, and took a step toward Hunter Reed. When I reached out, he recoiled, fear flashing in his eyes. A bitter smile tugged at my lips, and in the mirror beside us, I caught my own reflection, pale, hollow-eyed looking, less like a woman and more like a demon risen from the depths, fueled by rage and grief. I moved toward him, one slow, deliberate step at a time. Wasn't he the one who once sneered at me, asking what I could possibly do in my pregnant state? My faint smile hardened into something sharper, colder. And now, was he satisfied? How did it feel? I asked, with my eyes, to kill your own child with your own hands. Hunter couldn't meet my gaze. His white dress shirt was splattered with blood, my blood. We were like two wild animals locked in combat, but only I was bleeding, only I was hurting. Why, he panted as if out of breath, then shoved me away like a man desperate to escape, leaving the bathroom with a hollow, broken look. My strength gave out and I collapsed, but thankfully Claudia Pearson burst in just in time to catch me before I hit the floor. I stared at Hunter's retreating figure, and in that moment I wished with every fiber of my being that he would step out into the street and be struck dead by a speeding car. I had read plenty of romance novels where the heroine lost her child, yet still managed to cling to the man who had destroyed her, tangled in love and hate, playing out endless battles. But when it happened to me, it felt like half my soul had been ripped away. I spent a full week in the hospital, my body aching in every joint and muscle, my heart numb and hollow. If it hadn't been for Claudia and the white-hot hatred that anchored me to this world, I'm not sure what I would have done. When I was finally able to stand on my own, the woman Hunter had been cheating with came to find me. Her name was Sierra Blake, and I already knew exactly how she and Hunter had tangled themselves together. He hasn't been sleeping, can't keep food down. What did you do to him? She demanded, her voice sharp, accusing. I held the phone in silence. Her tone turned impatient. Say something. Do you know what he looks like right now? He's a wreck. Don't you care at all? My voice was calm, icy.
Rose, is he dead yet? On the other hand, she erupted. You're just waiting for him to die, aren't you? What kind of mother is this cruel? Just because he doesn't love you doesn't mean he should die. Don't you care about the karma for your own child? I let a cruel, bitter smile curl my lips. You and Hunter feels like you don't deserve to die peacefully. My child will find blessings in your suffering. Then I hung up and saved the recording of the call. I've never been one to attack another woman because I know how hard it is for us to survive in this world. But that doesn't mean I'll forgive someone who crosses the line, someone who humiliates and harms me. Trash belongs in the gutter, and some people deserve to be sent straight to their next life. While I was recovering, I refused to sit idle. I began gathering every piece of evidence I could find.
Every text Sierra sent me, every video from my home's security cameras I had saved before destroying the place. Everything was preserved. I even started digging into Hunter's financial records. He had actually bought her a condo. Claudia helped me track down the building, and after chatting with the manager, we discovered she had purchased it during the exact same time Hunter had made large withdrawals from our joint account. With my attorney's guidance, I meticulously prepared every document, every shred of proof. When Hunter was well enough to meet, I arranged for us to sit down together with my lawyer present. He leaned back on the sofa opposite me, his eyes dripping with contempt. Madeline Carter, he said, his voice oozing mockery. What performance are you putting on this time? Isn't this all about the money? His tone sharpened, his words cutting like glass. Of course it is. People like you love yourselves more than anything. You stabbed your own father, for God's sake. What wouldn't you do? You always blame everyone else, acting like you're some perfect victim. But what did you gain by using our child to get back at me? Just say what you want. He was my kid too. His voice rose with each sentence. His face flushed with anger. I sat still, silent, my eyes cold and detached as though I were watching a poorly acted play. When he finally finished his tirade, I clapped slowly, the sound sharp in the air like an insult. My voice dripped with mockery. What a remarkable father, truly admirable. You're the perfect husband, a shining example of what it means to be a great man. To have a husband like you must be a blessing beyond measure. Too bad I was never fortunate enough to receive such a gift. So I'll set you free, let you go find happiness with another woman. Isn't that better for everyone? His mouth opened and closed as if searching for words, but rage choked them back. The divorce process was grueling. First came the mandatory waiting period, then my demand for 60% of our marital assets. At first, Hunter Reed pretended to be indifferent, but when the reality of surrendering so much sank in, his composure cracked. He called me greedy, selfish, venom dripping from every word. I didn't rush. I had time. I had patience. Before pushing forward, I decided to give him a taste of the appetizer. I sent a few video clips to local media outlets. Sierra Blake had once dropped out of school for a year and had yet to graduate. I knew she'd loathe me for it, but if she couldn't get her diploma, I'd be more than satisfied. I sent the same evidence to her university's social media pages. If she dared to provoke me, she could hardly expect me to let her keep her pride intact. One night, half asleep, my phone rang. Hunter's voice came through loud and frantic. Madeline, do you know Sierra tried to kill herself? My tone was cold, almost bored. Oh, is she dead yet? His voice cracked. She's barely in her 20s. Yes, I replied evenly, so young. What a shame she chose a man without responsibility or ambition and ended up like this. She's no different from me. Poor vision in men always comes with a price. My detached words made him hang up abruptly. I pulled the blanket over my head and drifted back to sleep. The next morning I opened the door and froze. My mother was standing there. This apartment was rented. Hunter must have given her my address. I didn't know what to say. Most days I felt exhausted to the bone, but when I glanced down, I saw she was holding a large bag of groceries. Without a word, she walked straight into the kitchen and began preparing food. A chill crept over me, sweat beading on my skin. Ever since the miscarriage, moments like this came often, my body betraying me. I went to my room and lay down, my head spinning until I fell asleep without realizing it, waking only when my mother called me to eat. She had made chicken soup and sweet and sour ribs, my favorites. I couldn't meet her eyes as I sipped the broth. The soup was delicious, the taste of free-range chicken, faintly sweet, warming me from the inside, but my appetite was gone. I forced down a single bowl before exhaustion overtook me again. As she cleared the dishes, a teardrop landed on my hand. I looked up into her red, watery eyes. I wasn't sure if the next tears were hers or mine. She pulled me into her arms, her voice trembling with guilt. "You've suffered so much, Maddie." Her words broke something in me. "Why are you so stubborn? This is serious. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you come to me? Why did you let yourself endure this alone? What if something happened to your body?" I closed my eyes, my voice quiet and weary. "If I had told you, would you have agreed?" She froze, her body stiff, then looked down at me. I didn't meet her gaze. "Didn't you forgive that awful man?" "I didn't want to." "Didn't want to what?" she asked softly. I drew a deep breath, my eyes empty. I didn't want to regret it later. I didn't want to wake up one day and take out my resentment on the child. I didn't want them to grow up feeling unwanted, blamed, or guilty just for existing. Without another word, I stood and walked back to my room. After handling some matters with my lawyer, I stepped out again and found the kitchen still warm with food. I had just taken a few bites when the phone rang. It was Hunter. His voice was sharp, accusatory. "Madeline, do you have no shame? You send your mother to my parents' house to cause trouble over money." I kept my tone calm. "Is my mother okay?" "What do you think?" "Your family's crazy. No one dares to cross you." I drove straight to his parents' house. When I arrived, the place looked like a war zone. My mother had smashed nearly everything. Police officers and security guards stood in the living room. Hunter's face was covered in scratches, and his parents didn't look much better. I said nothing, just moved to shield my mother and took her hand to lead her out. Her hair was tangled, her clothes torn, her body marked with bruises. I offered to take her to the hospital, but she refused. In the end, I settled for a nearby clinic where they could at least tend to her wounds. Rain began to fall without warning. My mother hurriedly pulled off her only jacket, wrapping it around my head, before tugging me toward a shopfront awning to take shelter. She dashed into a nearby convenience store to buy an umbrella. I asked why she didn't buy two. She gave me a half-scolding smile and said we were almost home. A little rain wouldn't matter. I was what mattered. I stayed rooted where I stood, refusing to move. With a sigh, she gave in and went back to buy a second umbrella. I had never once limited her spending, often sending her money without hesitation. Yet she pinched every penny, even working as a janitor to earn extra income. Only when my father was in real trouble did she quietly step in to help him. When we got home, I collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted. My mother gently wiped away the raindrops lingering on my face. She looked at me for a long moment, her voice breaking as she asked why I had grown so painfully thin. Then the dam burst and she began to sob, unable to hold it in any longer. "It's all my fault," she cried. "Why is my daughter's life so hard?" It hit me then, despite the hurt she'd caused me in the past, her love for me was real. That unhappy marriage had robbed her of the ability to express it, of knowing what a healthy bond between a mother and daughter, or even a husband and wife, should look like. But she loved me, and that was enough. I clasped her hand, looked into her eyes, and spoke with certainty. "I decide my own life. I am not suffering, and no one can break me." I knew, as I had so many times before, that I would pull myself out of the swamp and keep moving forward. Sierra Blake was discharged from the hospital after just 2 days. I arranged to meet her and Hunter Reed together. The moment she saw me, her composure shattered. Fury twisted her face until it seemed she might actually try to kill me. That was fine. The night I had found her in my bed with my husband, I had wanted to stab them both. She cried, voice trembling, asking what I wanted to finally leave her alone. I smiled faintly. "I don't know yet, but your man still hasn't signed the divorce papers, and that makes me very unhappy. And when I'm unhappy, I tend to do things." I let my gaze cut through her. You know how us wives can be cruel to naive little girls like you. Hunter slammed his glass onto the table, shouting my name in warning. I picked up a teacup and flung its contents in his face, without hesitation. It's not your turn yet, I said coldly. Sierra's voice wavered. Stop it, Hunter. Just sign. Do you really want to keep letting her torment me? He snapped back bitterly. You don't understand. This isn't what you think. Tears streamed down Sierra's cheeks. You're right, I don't understand, but do you have any idea how you've destroyed my life? Don't you feel anything? Hunter stared at her conflicted, caught between guilt and frustration. They'd been fighting constantly lately. She was still young, her heart still soft, but her presence had brought him nothing but endless trouble, and he had no idea just how far I was willing to go, what I might do next. Perhaps it would be better to give me what I wanted and end it all. By now, Sierra's scandal had spread so far that she could no longer graduate. Gossip had begun to swirl about Hunter himself, and he didn't want it touching his company. Money could be replaced, reputation could not. Then one day a delivery arrived for him, the sofa set and round table I had ordered before everything fell apart. He stood in the empty apartment, its chaos cleaned away, but replaced by a hollow chill. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, a soft breeze drifting in from the balcony. He could almost see me sitting there with a cup of tea, reading quietly, as if none of this had ever happened. He sank to the floor, eyes vacant, heart pulled under by a tide of emptiness. The shrill ring of his phone broke the silence. It was Sierra, her voice urgent. She was pregnant. He was stunned. But the shock hadn't even settled before not long after she sold every single one of her shares to his biggest rival, Ms. Tran. The betrayal hit him like fire to dry brush. Why hadn't she spared him even an ounce of consideration? What more did she want? Whispers began to spread through his company, and with Ms. Tran now holding power far greater than his obstacles sprang up in every corner, each one deliberately placed in his path. Hunter Reed tried to hold on for a while, but eventually the weight of it all became too much. He sold his shares, withdrew his investment, and walked away from the company. His savings were nearly drained. He remembered those early days of building his business, when Madeline Carter had been by his side, carefully helping him shape everything from the ground up. She had always been cautious, prioritizing safety over risk. Back then, her meticulous way of working often irritated him, but now looking back, he realized just how many disasters she had helped him avoid. Sierra Blake was the opposite. She encouraged him, fueled his confidence, made him feel like a hero. It was that praise that led him to sink all his remaining funds into starting a pig farm, simply because she liked the idea of eating clean pork. At first, prices skyrocketed, and it seemed like a brilliant move. But then African swine fever hit, wiping out the entire operation and leaving him with nothing. Not long after, the money he had once given Sierra was claimed back by Madeline because it had been part of their marital assets. The final blow came when Sierra gave birth to a child with a congenital heart defect, requiring a large sum for surgery. Desperate Hunter had no choice but to agree to Madeline's strange condition. She handed him a vial of a drug developed by a researcher named Hannah Tran, telling him that if he took it, he would experience the pain of childbirth. In exchange, she would cover the entire cost of the baby's operation. The pain hit swiftly, mercilessly, leaving him curled up on the floor for 24 straight hours. His fingernails scratched the floor until they bled, the pain relentless. But Madeline only stood there, cold and distant, noting every detail. Only then did he begin to understand the brutality of childbirth, let alone the agony of having to give up one's own child. She kept her word, paying for the surgery in full. But soon after, Sierra disappeared with the baby. Before leaving, she delivered the final blow. The baby isn't yours. Hunter felt the world collapse around him. He sat there in a haze, unable to think of anyone else to tell. Without knowing why, he picked up a phone registered under a new number and called Madeline. Her voice was as calm as ever. "What is it, Hunter?" He said nothing. Through the line, he heard her soft laugh. "Don't tell me you regret it now." The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Her next words were steady, but sharp as a blade. "You destroyed everything yourself. Don't expect me to believe you again." And then in the background, the unmistakable voice of another man spoke near her, clear proof that she had moved on. His chest tightened until it felt like his heart had stopped. He knew then that there was no going back. The call ended abruptly, leaving him frozen in the emptiness of his own making. He had already known what her answer would be, but still like a fool he had hoped. How could she ever forgive him? He wandered down an empty street, his head spinning from alcohol. A flower vendor approached holding a bouquet of soft pink roses. His weary eyes fell on the blooms, and memories of Madeline came rushing back. She had always loved pink roses, gentle, sweet, full of life. A thought flickered in his mind, fragile and impossible. Maybe this was all just a bad dream. Maybe when he woke up their home would still be whole, and she would still be there waiting for him. He bought every single pink rose the vendor had. Clutching the bouquet like a lifeline, his unsteady steps carried him forward, believing that if he just went back, if he just held on, she would forgive him. He wanted to fix everything to return to the way things once were. But before he could take more than a few steps, a car came out of nowhere, hitting him with a force that left no room for survival. Blood spilled across the pavement, soaking into the delicate petals of the roses. Hunter felt the bouquet tumbling with him, a fragile emblem of a love long shattered. He died in the golden light of late afternoon sun, blazing, but no warmth left to feel. The memory of the 17-year-old boy, who once ran toward Madeline with a radiant smile and a handful of flowers, was buried alongside him, lost in the ruins of broken dreams. When Madeline received the news, she simply stared off into the distance. She did not cry, but inside there was an emptiness she could not name. She told herself she wasn't burying the 32-year-old man who had betrayed her, but the boy of 17 who had once given her hope and joy. Her voice was barely a whisper, but steady. It doesn't matter anymore. My life will not be defined by one kind of flower. New blooms would still open, and she would go on living at a vibrant life, no longer bound to the past.